Have you ever noticed that thing where, like, when you're really thinking deeply, other people get kind of uncomfortable?
Yeah.
It's like they don't want to, they'd rather talk about the weather or, celebrity gossip than actually, like, think about the meaning of life or something.
Great.
Well, we're going to dive deep into that today. We're going to explore the reasons why intelligent people can sometimes make others feel a little bit uneasy.
It's funny, right? Because you'd think intelligence would be, like, universally celebrated, but it's almost like it can be perceived as a threat sometimes.
Yeah, true.
And there's actually some really interesting philosophy about this.
Right.
We found this YouTube video that's all about Schopenhauer. And
Oh, yeah.
he was writing about this way back in the 19th century.
Wow. So this isn't just a modern day thing.
No, not at all.
So before we get too deep into Schopenhauer, maybe you can break down this whole mirror effect thing that the video talks about.
Okay, sure.
That's a pretty catchy term, by the way.
Yeah, the mirror effect is basically the idea that when you encounter someone who's really intellectually sharp, they sort of inadvertently reveal the areas where you might not be as strong.
I see.
And that can make people feel inadequate, like they're being judged or like...
Oh, so it's not that the deep thinker is intentionally trying to make anyone feel bad. It's just kind of like a side effect of them just being themselves.
Exactly. It's like everyone's walking around with these invisible measuring sticks for intelligence. And when someone comes along who's operating on a different level, it can kind of throw us off balance.
Yeah, I get that. But why is it intelligence specifically? Like, if someone is like a super athlete, we usually just think that's awesome.
Yeah.
But if someone's super smart, it can sometimes feel almost personal,
That's a really interesting point, and I think it goes back to, like, our evolutionary history.
Okay.
Because for most of human history, survival really depended on being accepted by the group.
Right.
Like, if you were ostracized from the tribe, you were basically goomed.
Yeah, you were done.
So our brains are kind of wired to prioritize fitting in, even if it means downplaying our unique strengths.
So basically, feeling threatened by someone's intelligence is like a leftover survival instinct from our caveman days.
Exactly.
Like, our brains are still in that don't get kicked out of the tribe mode.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is that this ancient wiring is actually backed up by modern neuroscience.
Really?
Yeah. There are studies that have shown that when we feel intellectually inferior, it triggers activity in the amygdala.
The amygdala.
Which is the part of the brain that processes fear.
Wait, are you saying that there's a literal fear response happening when I'm trying to have, like, a deep conversation and it's just not landing?
It's totally possible.
No wonder I feel so awkward in those situations.
Yeah.
It's not just me being socially inept. It's like a primal instinct kicking in.
It really is. And here's where it gets even more interesting. This fear response is actually amplified in group settings.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a group, your social status feels even more precarious. So you're even more sensitive to anything that might make you look bad.
This explains so much, because have you ever been in a group and, like, the conversation just stays super surface level?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Maybe that's why everyone's just terrified of sounding dumb in front of each other?
It's definitely a possibility. And, people might even try to subtly undermine the deep thinker in those situations.
Oh, yeah, just to protect their own ego.
Exactly. It's all about maintaining that sense of belonging.
This is getting pretty deep, but the video also talks about a bunch of cognitive biases that contribute to this whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like a laundry list of mental roadblocks that prevent us from embracing deep thinking.
Let's unpack a few of those.
Okay.
So there's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger, yeah.
Which basically says that people who are less competent in a particular area tend to overestimate their abilities.
Oh my gosh, I've definitely encountered that one. It's
Yeah.
like the less you know, the more confident you are.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, highly competent people often underestimate themselves.
Well, that's interesting.
So you can imagine how that leads to some pretty serious communication breakdowns.
Totally.
Like, imagine trying to have a nuanced discussion with someone who's utterly convinced they already know everything.
Oh, it's so frustrating.
It is. And then you've got the status quo bias.
Status quo bias.
Which is basically that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality.
Right, even if the it in question is kind of a mess.
Exactly, because change is uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is.
So we're naturally inclined to resist it.
Even if the change could be good for us.
Exactly.
And then there's the backfire effect.
Oh, yes, the backfire effect.
This one's kind of mind-blowing to me, because it's like the more evidence you show someone that contradicts their beliefs, the more they dig in.
It's a fascinating phenomenon.
It is.
It really highlights the power of emotion over logic.
Yeah.
We like to think we're these rational beings.
Yeah.
But a lot of times our feelings just dictate our beliefs more than we realize.
So basically, when you combine all these biases with that innate fear of looking stupid, it's no wonder that deep thinking can be met with so much resistance.
Exactly.
But then you've got Schopenhauer, who just comes along and says intelligence is a straight-up curse.
Schopenhauer was a bit of a pessimist.
Yeah.
But his point was that intelligent people often see the world too clearly.
I can see that.
Like they see all the flaws, the inconsistencies, the hypocrisy that most people are able to just gloss over.
Right.
And that can be really disillusioning and isolating.
So it's like ignorance is bliss and intelligence is a burden.
Kind of, yeah.
But did he offer any solutions to this so-called curse?
He did. And this is actually a point I think is really important for our listeners to hear.
Great.
He believed that the key to coping with this curse is finding your intellectual tribe.
Your people.
Exactly. The people who get you, who appreciate your depth, who challenge you to think even bigger.
That makes a lot of sense because if you're constantly surrounded by people who are threatened by your intelligence, that's got to be exhausting.
It's draining.
But if you can find a community where your thinking is valued, that's going to be like...
It's liberating.
Yeah.
And that's something I think is important to keep in mind as we continue this conversation.
Okay.
Because it's not just about understanding why deep thinking faces resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about figuring out how to navigate those challenges and create spaces where intelligence can actually thrive.
I love that. So we've established that sometimes intelligent people can inadvertently make others feel uncomfortable.
Yes.
We've talked about the evolutionary roots of that, the neuroscience behind it, even some of the cognitive biases that make it worse.
Right.
But how does this all actually play out in the real world?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is that it often plays out in some pretty discouraging ways.
Okay.
You know, history is full of examples of brilliant minds who were rejected, ridiculed, even persecuted for their ideas.
Yeah, like Socrates, Galileo, Nietzsche.
Exactly. This goes on and on.
It's almost like humanity has this built-in lag time when it comes to recognizing true genius. Like by the time we catch up, the damage is already done.
Right.
And it's not just history, right? The digital age seems to be amplifying this whole phenomenon in some pretty troubling ways.
It really is. I mean, think about it in a world where social media algorithms are prioritizing shallow, emotionally charged content over like thoughtful, nuanced discussion. It can feel like deep thinking is being actively suppressed.
It does.
But don't despair just yet.
Okay, good.
There are ways to navigate this new landscape.
Okay.
And we're going to explore those a little bit later in our deep dive.
Because I'm already feeling the urge to unplug and go live in a cabin in the woods.
I hear you.
But seriously, this is some heavy stuff to think about.
It is.
So listeners, if you've ever felt like your brain power is more of a burden than a blessing, you are not alone.
Not all.
And remember,
understanding the reasons behind this resistance is the first step towards overcoming it. That's a good point.
So let's keep diving deep, shall we?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
So we've talked about all this stuff about how deep thinking can sometimes trigger these like primal fear responses.
Right.
And how society isn't always so ready to embrace those big ideas.
Yeah.
But where does that leave us, the deep thinkers of the world?
Well, I think...
Are we just doomed to be misunderstood forever?
Not at all. I think actually understanding these patterns can help you navigate them more effectively.
So it's not about dumbing ourselves down. It's about finding like smarter ways to connect.
Exactly. It's almost like learning a new language.
Okay.
You know, if you want to communicate with someone who speaks a different language, you don't just start shouting English at them louder.
Right.
You got to find a way to bridge the gap.
I love that analogy. So how do we bridge the gap when it comes to like deep thinking?
Well,
because I still want to be able to share my ideas without feeling like I'm speaking a foreign language.
Of course. And I think it all comes down to understanding your audience.
Okay.
And tailoring your approach accordingly. So like reading the room a little bit.
Exactly. You don't have to unpack the entire universe every time you open your mouth.
Right.
Sometimes a well-placed question or a thought-provoking anecdote can be much more effective than like a dense philosophical argument.
But it's more about being strategic with our deep thinking.
Yeah. Picking your battles.
Picking our battles.
And also remembering that not every conversation needs to be a deep dive.
That's true.
Sometimes it's okay to just enjoy the surface level chit chat.
Right.
And save those big ideas for the people and the moments that are truly receptive.
Okay, that's a good reminder. I think sometimes I get so excited about like the stuff I'm learning.
Yeah.
That I forget to check if the other person is even remotely interested.
It happens to the best of us. But here's a tip. Pay attention to people's body language.
Oh, yeah.
And their verbal cues.
Oh.
Like, are they asking follow-up questions? Are their eyes glazing over?
Right.
Learning to read those signals can really help you adjust your approach on the fly.
That's really helpful. So we've talked about being mindful of our audience.
Right.
But what about those times when you just can't help but dive deep?
Sure.
Like you're just bursting with ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, remember that it's okay to simplify complex ideas without dumbing them down.
Okay.
You can still convey the essence of a concept without overwhelming people with jargon or like technical details.
Right.
Think of it like creating a trailer for a movie.
Okay.
You want to give them a taste of what's to come.
Right.
Without spoiling the whole plot.
That's a good way to think about it.
And then another tip, don't be afraid to use humor and storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
To make your points more engaging.
Okay.
People are much more likely to remember something that made them laugh.
Right.
Or that sparked some kind of emotional connection.
You know, that's so true. I think sometimes I get so focused on like the logic and the reasoning behind an idea that I forget to inject any personality into it.
It's a common trap for deep thinkers.
Yeah.
We love the ideas themselves, but we forget that other people connect with stories and emotions.
More easily.
Much more easily.
Yeah, this is all super helpful because it's like instead of feeling discouraged by the fact that society kind of pushes back against deep thinking, we can actually use this knowledge to become better communicators and connect with the people who are genuinely receptive to our ideas.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
If you've ever felt isolated or misunderstood for your intelligence, you're in good company.
It's true.
History is full of brilliant minds who were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
And they face rejection for their ideas.
Like, it's almost a badge of honor at this point.
It kind of is.
But it is comforting to know that, like, the struggle is real.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be a lonely one.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe by understanding this resistance, we can actually start to change the conversation.
Okay.
And create a world that's a little bit more welcoming to deep thinking.
That's a great goal to strive for. But even if the world doesn't suddenly embrace all of our big ideas, there's still value in finding the people who do.
Absolutely.
And having those deep, meaningful conversations.
Those are the best.
That make life so much richer.
I couldn't agree more so to all our fellow deep thinkers out there. Keep those brains buzzing.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to seek out your intellectual tribe.
You know, it's funny, as we're talking about all this stuff about how society pushes back against deep thinkers, the video also made this point about how sometimes society doesn't even know what it truly embraced. Like, isn't it ironic that some of the most celebrated figures in history were initially met with, like, huge resistance?
That is a really insightful observation. And, you know, there's actually a psychological theory that kind of explains this.
Really?
It's called system justification theory.
System justification theory.
And it basically says that people are motivated to defend the status quo, even when it's clearly not working in their best interests.
So even if a system is, like, flawed or unfair, people will rationalize it because it's familiar, it's predictable.
Exactly. Change just feels too scary.
Wow. And that ties into groupthink, right?
It absolutely does.
Where everyone just goes along with the crowd, even if they have doubts.
Because they don't want to rock the boat.
Right. Or be seen as like a dissenter or whatever.
Exactly. That need to belong is so strong that we're willing to sacrifice our own critical thinking skills.
It's true.
Just to fit in.
And that plays out on a societal level too, right?
Really.
Like, think about how many truly innovative ideas were initially met with resistance or ridicule or even like outright hostility.
It's sad, but it's true.
It's like we as humans have this collective blind spot when it comes to recognizing true genius.
We do. We crave comfort and predictability.
Yeah.
Even if it means missing out on groundbreaking ideas.
And the video had some really interesting examples of this.
Oh, yeah, tons.
Like Galileo.
Yeah.
He was persecuted for proving that the Earth revolves around the sun.
I know, it's crazy, right?
And today we celebrate him as a scientific hero. But during his lifetime, his ideas were considered dangerous and heretical.
Exactly. And then there's Van Gogh.
Oh, yeah, Van Gogh.
Died in poverty and obscurity, only for his painting to become worth millions after his death.
It's like we only appreciate brilliance once it's safe.
Right. Once it's no longer a threat.
To the established order.
Exactly. It's a tragic irony, isn't it?
It is. It really is. And it speaks to this like deep fear of change.
Yeah.
That seems to be like baked into human society.
It does. We crave comfort.
Yeah.
We crave predictability, even if it means stifling progress.
So knowing all of this, what can we as deep thinkers actually do about it? It's not like we can single-handedly rewire society's sphere of intelligence overnight.
You're right. It is a systemic issue, but that doesn't mean we're powerless.
Okay.
I think, as we talked about earlier, finding your intellectual tribe is so crucial.
Yeah.
Connect with people who get you, who appreciate your depth, who challenge you to think even more critically.
Right. They're the ones who energize.
They do. They make you feel seen and understood.
Not like you're speaking a different language.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of clear communication.
Okay.
Learn to articulate your ideas in a way that is both compelling and accessible.
Right.
Not every conversation needs to be a lecture.
Yeah.
Sometimes a well-placed analogy or a relatable story can work wonders.
It's like that Einstein quote.
Oh, yeah.
If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
I love that one.
Yeah. Brevity and clarity are powerful tools, especially when you're dealing with complex topics.
And remember, you don't need to convince everyone.
That's true.
Focus on connecting with those who are genuinely receptive to your ideas.
Right.
Plant those seeds of curiosity, spark those moments of aha.
Yeah.
And let the ripple effect do its work.
So it's about being strategic with our deep thinking.
It is.
Knowing when to dive deep.
Yeah.
When to tread lightly.
Right.
And when to just savor the company of fellow intellectual adventurers.
Well said. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Between honoring our own intellectual curiosity.
Yeah.
And navigating a world that doesn't always appreciate.
It's a journey.
It is.
Not a destination.
Exactly.
But hey, who wants to live a life of intellectual stagnation anyway?
That's right. The discomfort, the challenges, the moments of feeling like an outsider, those are all part of the process.
Yeah.
Of growth and discovery.
And who knows, maybe by embracing our own deep thinking and finding ways to share it effectively,
right,
we can slowly chip away at that societal resistance and create a world that's a little bit more welcoming to the people who dare differently.
I love that thought. So to all our listeners out there who've ever felt misunderstood for their intelligence, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those brains buzzing.
Yes.
The world needs your unique perspective.
It does.
Even if it doesn't always realize it.
That is the perfect note to end on.
It is.
So until next time, keep diving deep and don't be afraid to make a splash. It's funny because as we're exploring all these reasons why deep thinking faces so much pushback, I'm realizing that there's also this weird disconnect between what society says it values and what it actually rewards.
Oh, absolutely.
It's we love the idea of brilliance and innovation, but when it comes to actually living our lives, we'd rather stick to the familiar and the predictable.
Exactly. And, the video actually touched upon this too.
Okay.
It's almost as if we're drawn to novelty and brilliance in theory.
Right.
But then in practice, we tend to favor the familiar and the predictable.
It's so true. It's we admire those rebels and innovators from a safe distance.
Yes.
But when it comes to our own lives, we don't want to rock the boat too much.
And this can be incredibly frustrating for those deep thinkers
who are
constantly pushing boundaries and challenging conventional wisdom.
Right, because they're seen as the disruptors, the troublemakers.
It's true.
Even when they have good intentions.
Right.
So how do we reconcile this tension then between our admiration for deep thinking and our resistance to it?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is it even possible?
I think it starts with recognizing that change is a process, not an event.
Okay.
We can't expect society to just suddenly embrace these radical new ideas overnight.
Right.
But we can create spaces where those ideas can at least be explored.
Okay.
And debated without fear of judgment or rejection.
So instead of trying to force our big ideas onto an unreceptive audience, maybe we should focus on building those communities where those ideas can actually flourish.
Exactly. Think of it like gardening.
Okay.
We wouldn't just scatter seeds randomly and hope for the best.
Right. You got to prepare the soil.
Exactly. You got to provide the right nutrients.
Right.
Create an environment where those seeds can take root and grow.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So if we want deep thinking to thrive, we need to create those fertile intellectual ecosystems where curiosity is nurtured, where diverse perspectives are valued, and where challenging the status quo is actually encouraged.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the importance of finding your intellectual tribe.
Your people.
Yes. These are the people who will not only appreciate your depth, but they'll also push you to think even bigger and bolder.
They'll help you refine your ideas, challenge your assumptions, and just make that whole journey of deep thinking more enjoyable.
More collaborative.
Yeah, exactly, because deep thinking shouldn't be this solitary pursuit.
No, it thrives on connection.
On collaboration.
Yes, the exchange of ideas.
So to all of our listeners out there who are on this journey of deep thinking, remember, you are not alone.
You're not.
There are other people out there who share your passion for exploring the complexities of the world.
Yes.
Seek them out, connect with them.
Let those intellectual sparks fly.
And never underestimate the power of your own unique perspective.
Never.
The world needs your insights, your questions.
Yes.
Your willingness to challenge the status quo.
It does, even if it doesn't always realize it.
Because even if it feels like society isn't always ready to embrace deep thinking, It's often the deep thinkers who end up changing the world.
That's true. So keep diving deep.
Keep questioning.
Keep those brains buzzing.
And remember,
the most profound discoveries often start with a single daring thought.
And that, my friends, is a perfect note to end our deep dive on.
It is.
Until next time, stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop seeking those aha moments that make life so intellectually stimulating.